I can still picture the day I died. Not the death that will one day take me in the Emperor's wars, but the moment the child I used to be stopped existing. The sky over Nocturne tore open like a wound, and a capsule of burning metal fell screaming onto the volcanic flats. When they found me in the ash, I was all ribs and scorch marks, half my body blistered, both hands locked around a crude hammer I'd forged from scrap and spite. That was the day I became more than human. They say the first death is the easiest. If so, it's only because it teaches you how many more are coming. I've died 1,000 times since. Each brother who never stood again, each innocent I couldn't reach in time, each world left behind in flames. Small deaths. Necessary deaths. The coin we spend to purchase what the Imperium insists on calling glory. My name is Sergeant TK of the Salamanders' 3rd Company. I have served the Emperor for 276 Terran years. I have walked through heat that would peel flesh from bone. I have looked into nightmares that would shatter a mortal mind in a single heartbeat. I have watched the best and worst of humanity surface at once, sometimes in the same person, in the same choice. I have been named hero, monster, savior, butcher. The truth, like fire, rarely stays on one side of the line. The first lesson the Salamanders teach is that flame is not only ruin. Fire cleanses, fire remakes. In the forge, weak metal becomes something that can bear weight. The impurities burn away. What remains is harder, more resilient, useful. But usefulness is never gentle. Becoming something that endures is a violent rite. My own remaking began in the burning halls of Mount Deathfire. I was 12 by Terran measure, though on Nocturne, where destruction and rebirth are as ordinary as seasons, numbers don't carry much meaning. I had survived my trial. I had brought back a relic dragged from deep within a volcanic beast that threatened our settlements like a living calamity. My lungs were scorched, my skin raw and blistered, but I had proven myself worth considering. Then the apothecaries began their work. They dismantled me piece by piece. They took fragile human organs and replaced them with engineered miracles. They altered my frame, reinforced bone, lengthened limbs, widened ribcage, making room for a body designed to survive what men were never meant to face. They rewrote my very blood with the sacred gene seed of Vulcan himself. I screamed until screaming became a kind of calendar. Days, weeks, months. And then, one morning, I realized I couldn't remember how to do it anymore. Somewhere in that silence, the boy I'd been slipped away. I caught my reflection in the polished face of a surgical tool and saw ember-red eyes staring back from skin like cooled obsidian. I had been reborn in fire. I was no longer human. I was Astartes. I was Salamander. The people we protect look at us with awe, with reverence, with fear. They see armor, size, the legend of angels. They do not see what it cost to become the thing standing between them and the dark. They see the promise. They do not see the price. But I'm racing ahead. A space marine's life is war. Endless war. War without an end state beyond survival. War without the comfort of victory. War without meaning except what we carve from it with bolter and blade. Yet for Vulcan's sons, war has always carried another weight. For us, there is no glory in battle by itself. Glory, if the word can be used at all, exists only in the lives saved, in lifting up those who cannot lift themselves. My first deployment came 63 years after my ascension to a mining world called Corrigus II, a planet with little strategic value on a map, except that it held 8 billion Imperial citizens, the kind of world the Imperium remembers only when the tithe is due, or when disaster erupts. Disaster had erupted. The distress call spoke of rebellion. What waited for us was worse. Genestealers had infiltrated the primary colony 3 generations earlier. By the time we arrived, the infection had reached into the planet's ruling class. Half of them carried the subtle fingerprints of Xeno's corruption, hands that bent wrong, eyes that caught light like polished stone, mouths that opened a fraction too wide. I remember standing inside the drop pod as it fell toward the surface, my brothers packed around me in the shaking dark. The veterans wore the still, resigned faces of men who already knew what the first minutes would look like. The younger ones, myself included, still clung to simpler stories. Heroism, salvation, clean outcomes. Captain Drouse watched me with something like pity. He had 3 centuries of war written into the scars of his face. "Remember this, brother TK," he said, voice like volcanic rock. "We are Salamanders. We bring the Emperor's mercy as well as his judgment." Then, quieter, the real lesson. "Save those who can be saved." I nodded, full of pride, full of purpose, without understanding the weight of that command. We made planetfall in the capital mining settlement, a sprawling city carved into a mountain rich with adamantium ore. The streets were empty. The silence was complete. 8 million people lived in that city, and not one of them walked beneath its towers. "Where are they?" Brother Agathon asked, sweeping his bolter across the vacant plaza. A sound answered him. Slick, wet, crawling, like something moving through pipes and teeth. It came from everywhere at once. Sewer grates, dark hab windows, tunnel mouths feeding into the city like arteries. "They're here," Captain Drouse said, igniting his power sword. The blue field hummed to life, throwing ghost light across his features. "They're all around us." The first wave erupted from below. Adamantium grates burst upward as bodies surged out of the sewer systems, hundreds, then more. They had once been human, miners, clerks, children. Now they were distorted echoes of humanity. Limbs too long, skulls wrong, muscles stretched tight where it should never have grown. I remember raising my bolter. I remember the first shot I fired, watching it slam into the chest of a figure that had once been a woman. She still wore the torn remnants of an administrator's uniform. A name tag clung to her chest, just above where my round struck. Livia. I tell myself she was already gone, that the real Livia died long before my finger moved. But in the thin scraps of sleep a space marine is sometimes granted. I still see faces. Hers among them. We fought for 18 hours without pause. Bolt fire and flame turned the narrow streets into burning corridors. The infected came in waves, trying to drown us with numbers. We burned them by the hundreds, by the thousands. The air grew heavy with promethium and char. It clung to the throat until you could taste it. 6 hours in, my bolter ran dry. I drew blade and chain, and the fighting became close enough to feel breath, to see eyes, to recognize the remnants of people in what they had become. Some begged, some thanked me, and every time I ended their suffering, something in me died again. By nightfall, the streets ran dark with tainted runoff. We had carved out a perimeter around the central administrative complex, but the city belonged to the Genestylers and their hybrid spawn. 18 salamanders against millions. "We should request exterminatus," Brother Hector said as we regrouped in what had once been a city council chamber. Captain Drouse shook his head. "There are 8 billion souls on this world. Not all are infected. We do not condemn the innocent if there is any other way." "With respect," Hector pressed, "we've already lost 3 brothers. We cannot cleanse a planet with 15 Astartes." "We are salamanders," Drouse replied. And that was answer enough. That night we learned there were survivors, untainted citizens who had barricaded themselves in the deep mining tunnels behind emergency blast doors built to contain cave-ins. Nearly 2 million people, trapped, terrified, running out of food and air. "This is why we don't simply burn the world and leave," Drouse told us as we gathered around the Vox unit catching their desperate transmissions. "This is what separates us from other chapters. We remember what we fight for." We spent 8 days cutting a path to those tunnels. Street by street, building by building, every meter paid for in blood. Most of it corrupted, some of it not. We lost 2 more brothers in those days. Men I had trained beside, fought beside, called family. I remember Brother Kai's most clearly, quiet, steady, gifted with the hands of a maker. His work on armor plate was spoken of with respect throughout the chapter. He died holding a service tunnel against a surge of Genestealers so 300 mining families could escape to our extraction point. When we recovered him, we found he had braced himself in death to keep the passage blocked. Even at the end, duty held him upright. We evacuated 164,512 Imperial citizens from Corrigus II. And then the Inquisition arrived. Cold, absolute, late. A battle fleet slid into orbit, and the sentence was carried out from above. The official record names the operation a success, a triumph of Imperial might. It does not name the billions who died in atomic fire. It does not name the 5 Salamanders who gave their lives so strangers could live. This is the glory they recite beneath vaulted ceilings in faraway cathedrals. This is the price of survival in a galaxy that knows only war. Corrigus Set was only the beginning. After that, years blurred. Decades of campaigns, centuries of battle. Worlds and faces ran together like paint washed by rain. But some never faded because they burned too hot to forget. Hive Prime, an Adeptus Mechanicus forge world, fell to chaos. We fought through manufactorums larger than cities where even the machinery had been twisted into blasphemous parodies. The air was thick with toxic haze and the tortured cries of broken machine spirits. In the forges that once birthed tanks and weapons for the Emperor's armies, corrupted tech priests worked unholy rites, binding demons into steel and flesh alike. We answered the only way we could. With fire, our flamer's sacred promethium purified what could not be saved. We fought there for 3 months of unrelenting nightmare. I watched a demon engine take Brother Terran, dragging him into its grinding bulk as his armor crumpled like thin metal in a vice. I killed the thing with melter charges placed where machine and warp stuff joined imperfectly. I listened to it scream as it died. I felt no triumph, only the cold relief that it would take no more. We extracted 12,000 uncorrupted tech adepts from Hive Prime. The rest were judged beyond saving. The Inquisition's records note that we preserved 37% of the Forge World's most valuable assets. They never note the cost. They never do. Then there was Valos 9, an agri-world on the edge of Ultima Segmentum, rolling fields, clear skies, the kind of place that reminds you what humanity is trying to keep alive. It was one of the rare deployments where we arrived before the disaster fully settled in. Orcs had landed on the southern continent, a splinter force broken in the void by the Imperial Navy. Small by naval standards. But to farmers and their children, it might as well have been the end of everything. We deployed straight into the largest settlement under assault. I remember fields of gold turning to flame, smoke climbing into a sky that should have stayed blue. I remember crude gunfire, civilian screams, and the stink of blood and burning crops carried on a wind that should have smelled only of harvest. This time, we arrived in time. The greenskins had only just breached the defenses when our drop pods slammed into their rear lines. We emerged in heat and fury, bolters hammering, flamers painting the land with cleansing fire. The orcs turned toward us, delighted, eager for a real fight. Their war boss loomed, 3 heads taller than even an Astartes, howling a challenge that made the ground seem to answer. "For Vulcan and the Emperor!" Captain Drouse roared back, and we charged. There is a brutal clarity to fighting orcs that you rarely find elsewhere. They are not corrupted citizens wearing familiar faces. They are not an infection you must burn with regret. They are war made flesh, honest in the worst possible way. Blade against blade, strength against strength, will against will. No agonizing moral calculus, no heartbreaking choices, only the clean violence of combat. I met the war boss alongside Brother Imperial. It wore crude armor, welded from tank plate and scavenged wreckage. Its power claw could shear ceramite like cloth. Its roar was deafening, tusked jaws spitting saliva as it laughed at the prospect of resistance. Imperial struck first, his power axe biting deep into its shoulder. The beast barely seemed to care. It swung its claw in a brutal arc and caught Imperial in the side, tearing through armor and flesh. He went down, but not before emptying his bolt pistol into the war boss's chest, detonations staggering the brute just enough for me to close. My chainsword screamed as I drove it into the wound Imperial had opened. The monster bellowed, thrashing. Its claw snapped out and tore my helmet away, ripping skin from my scalp. Hot blood ran down my face against cold black skin. The war boss grinned as if that meant I was finally vulnerable. It did not understand Vulcan's suns. It did not understand what fire makes of us. I surged forward, leaving my chainsword lodged in its flesh, and drew my combat knife. Simple, personal, forged by my own hands in Nocturne's volcanic heat. The blade held my own modifications. It glowed with gathered heat. As the war boss reached for me, I slipped inside its guard and drove the knife up beneath its jaw. The superheated edge cut through bone and muscle with terrifying ease, continuing upward into the darkness where thought becomes silence. The war boss's eyes widened, then emptied. It toppled like a felled tree, nearly crushing me beneath its weight. With their leader dead, the orcs lost momentum. They splintered into smaller mobs, easier to isolate, easier to destroy. By nightfall, the settlement was secure. I found Imperial under the apothecary's care. He was badly hurt, but alive. He looked up at me, pale, steady-eyed. "Did we save them?" he asked. "Yes, brother," I told him. "The settlement stands. The people live." A rare smile touched his face. Then it was worth it. We spent 3 weeks on Valos 9 hunting down the remaining greenskins and securing the settlements. We lost no brothers. We saved nearly 3 million Imperial citizens. By any measure, it was a clean victory. The kind the Imperium's story mills love to polish into legend. And even there, reality found its way in. On our final day, as we prepared to depart, a boy approached me at the edge of the main settlement. He couldn't have been more than 10. His eyes were wide as he took in my size, my scarred armor, the inhuman shape of me. "Are you an angel?" he asked, voice hushed with awe. I looked down at him and saw myself as I had been. Small, human, breakable, staring up at something beyond comprehension. "No," I said, "just a soldier." He shook his head. "My father says you're the Emperor's angels of death. He says you saved us." "We did our duty," I answered. "Nothing more." He studied me for a long moment. "Does it hurt?" he asked at last. "Does what hurt?" He gestured vaguely at everything I was. I could have lied. Perhaps I should have. But something in his face demanded truth. "Yes," I said. "It hurts every day." He nodded as if I had confirmed what he already suspected. "Thank you," he whispered, then ran back to his family, to a life that would continue because we had done what was necessary. I've often wondered what became of him, whether he reached adulthood, whether the Imperium's hunger eventually claimed him as it claims all useful things, whether he remembered the truth. It hurts every day. This is the glory they speak of in quiet voices. The honor of being chosen, the price we pay willingly because purpose is the only mercy the galaxy offers us. But the galaxy rarely grants victories as clean as Valos 9. More often, it looks like Kyros 3, a hive world in segmentum tempestus, its spires stacked with billions beneath skies choked permanent gray. A world that manufactured chemical munitions for the Guard. Factories vomiting toxins that turned rain acidic and soil dead for 1,000 kilometers around. We came in response to a planetary uprising. Official reports claimed violent worker revolt threatened vital war production. The truth was uglier and more human. The governor and his administration had been working the lower hives to death. Safety protocols were stripped away to increase output. Workers handled lethal compounds without protection. Hab blocks were sealed when contamination reached critical levels. Entire populations left to die, rather than receive treatment that cost too much. The revolt began when mid-Hive physicians broke Imperial law by treating the afflicted. When the governor's forces came to arrest them, the people rose to protect the only ones trying to keep them alive. It wasn't rebellion against the Imperium in their hearts. It was the simple instinct to survive. But the bureaucrats who dispatched us don't care about nuance. Rebellion is rebellion. Production must not falter. The Emperor's wars must be fed. We made planetfall at the governor's palace, a grotesque monument to excess perched at the top of the highest spire, above the smog, under clear skies the lower hives never saw. Governor Mothus greeted us himself, swollen with wealth, dripping gold, skin pale and smooth, untouched by the chemical burns that marked his workers. "Thank the Emperor you've arrived," he wheezed, bowing toward Captain Draus. "The rebels control the lower 60 levels of Hives Secundus and Tertus. They've seized key Munitorum assets. Production is down 30% in 2 weeks. Unacceptable." Draus regarded him with the impassive ember gaze of our kind. "We will restore order," he said. The governor smiled, flashing augmented teeth of gold and platinum. "Excellent. I've prepared tactical layouts. I recommend saturation bombardment of the worker Hab levels. Break their will early. Everything collapses quickly." I watched Draus closely. After centuries beside him, I could read the disgust he didn't bother showing openly. "We will assess the situation ourselves," Draus replied. "The Salamanders do not make war on civilians if it can be avoided." The governor's smile faltered. "These are not civilians. They are traitors." "They are Imperial citizens," Draus said, tone ending the conversation. "We proceed by our own judgment." That night, while the governor held a feast in our honor that none of us attended, we sent infiltration teams into the lower hives. I led one, moving through maintenance ducts and waste chutes to bypass barricades. We wore stripped-down armor and carried minimal weaponry to stay mobile in the cramped underhive arteries. What we found confirmed our suspicions. The rebels were ordinary citizens driven to desperation by sustained cruelty. Many showed the scars of chemical exposure, raw sores, ruined lungs. Children bore mutations born not of chaos, but of toxins. Their leaders were not radicals. They were supervisors, medici staff, maintenance techs, people who had decided survival was worth defying an order. In a reclaimed processing plant, I observed a makeshift hospital. Hundreds lay on improvised beds while exhausted medics worked with scavenged equipment. Among them moved a woman who seemed to hold the whole operation together. Small, thin, angular, moving with purpose. The left side of her face was scarred by chemical burns, pulling her features into a permanent grimace. And yet she carried herself with quiet dignity, going from patient to patient, offering what comfort she could. I watched her from the shadows for an hour. I saw her hold a dying man's hand until his last breath. I saw her soothe a child whose lungs were so damaged that every inhale looked like pain. I watched her take charge of the little they had left, counting out bandages, water, filters, rations, turning scarcity into order through sheer will. When I returned to our forward command post, I gave Captain Draus the full report. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked a single question. "What would you do, Brother TK?" Even then, I understood what he was really asking. It wasn't tactics, it was identity. A measure of whether I truly grasped what it meant to wear the Drake upon my shoulder. "We talk," I said. "These people aren't trying to topple the Imperium. They're trying to survive. If the governor enforces real safety protocols, funds medici treatment, and offers amnesty to those who rose up, they'll go back to their shifts willingly." Draus gave the smallest nod. Approval. Restrained. "And if he refuses?" "Then we remove him," I said, and felt how close those words came to treason even as they rang with plain logic. A dead world produces nothing. A workforce spent like fuel leaves no one to replace it. What's happening here isn't only wrong, it's wasteful. For a heartbeat, Draus actually laughed. It was so rare a sound from one of our kind that several brothers glanced over as if they'd heard something impossible. "Well argued," he said. You're thinking like Vulcan would. What saves the most, without forgetting a single life, has value. Then his face settled back into stone. We don't have the authority to execute a governor, however deserved. But there may be another path. At dawn, Drouse laid our terms before Governor Malthus. We will end the unrest, he said, but not as your cudgel. We guarantee worker safety reforms, Medici support for the injured, and amnesty for all but the most violent ringleaders. In return, labor resumes and production stabilizes. Malthus turned purple with rage. You overstep, he spat. You were sent to crush traitors, not bargain with them. We were sent to restore order and resume output, Drouse replied, calm as a cooling forge. This achieves both with fewer losses. It is the most efficient course. The governor threatened reports. To the chapter, to the sector authorities, to the Inquisition itself. Drouse didn't flinch. You are free to complain, he said. In the meantime, we proceed, unless you intend to retake the lower hives with your own troops. That ended the argument. His forces had already proven helpless against people with nothing left to lose. Without us, he had no lever to pull. Fine, he snarled at last. Do it your way, but I won't forget this. Even Astartes answer to Imperial justice. Drouse dipped his head in a bow that contained no respect. We depend on it, Governor. We contacted the rebel leadership that same day. I went with the delegation. We entered their territory in full plate, because we would not pretend to be harmless. But our weapons stayed locked and holstered, a deliberate balance of power and restraint. They received us in the same improvised hospital I had watched from the shadows. The woman with the burned face stood at the front of their group. She held her chin high, though I could smell the fear beneath her composure. 5 space marines in a low-ceilinged chamber would frighten anyone who still had the sense to fear. I am Captain Drouse of the Salamanders, my commander said, his voice filling the space. We bring a proposal to end this conflict. The woman stepped forward. Vasha Kin, she said, elected speaker for the Coalition of Worker Safety. We didn't want war, Captain. We wanted to live. So I've learned, Drouse replied, and that is why we are here. Not to erase you, but to find a way forward. He outlined the terms safety reforms with enforcement, Medici access, amnesty, and a return to work under conditions fit for humans rather than expendable parts. They listened as if they were hearing a language they'd forgotten existed. They had braced for execution, for a massacre, for martyrdom. They had not braced for mercy. Why? Vasha asked at last. Her voice was steady, but the question was raw. Why help us? We're nothing to the Imperium. You're everything. Drouse corrected her with quiet certainty. You are its foundation, its lifeblood. Without citizens willing to toil and endure, the Imperium is nothing but empty spires and hollow rites. Another leader leaned forward. And when you leave, what stops Malthus from breaking every promise? He won't, I said, and surprised even myself by speaking. All eyes turned to me. Because we won't leave, I continued. Not entirely. I'll remain here with a small detachment. We'll ensure the terms are honored. It was presumptuous. I had not requested permission. I had not discussed it with Drouse beforehand. But when I glanced at my captain, I saw approval, not shock. Brother Sergeant TK speaks with my authority, Drouse said. We do not abandon those under our protection. Vasha studied us with her one unscarred eye narrowed. And what do you want in return? She asked. Beyond us crawling back to the lines. Nothing, Drouse said simply. She let out a sharp laugh, humorless. Forgive me, Captain, but nobody in the Imperium does anything for nothing, least of all for people like us. I met her gaze. We were human once, I said. Some of us remember what that means. A week later, the workers returned to their stations. Output rose quickly, first to a survivable baseline, then climbing as the injured stabilized and the hives began to breathe again. The reforms came slowly, grudgingly, but they came. I stayed on Keros III for 3 years with rotating brothers, establishing a permanent garrison in Hive Secundus. Our presence did most of the work. It is remarkable how swiftly corruption discovers a conscience when an Astartes is watching. Vasha became the bridge between the Labor Coalition and the planetary administration. The burns on her face never truly healed, but her spine never bent. Once a month, she visited our garrison to report on compliance, shortages, violations, everything the palace preferred to ignore. Over time, something like respect formed between us. Cautious, earned, never sentimental. During my final month on Kiros III, before I was recalled to rejoin my company, she brought me a gift, a simple bronze medallion, the kind chemical plant workers receive if they survive 3 decades of shifts and poison air. This was my father's, she said, placing it in my palm where it looked absurdly small. He died of lung rot 2 days before the uprising. His death lit the fuse. I can't take this, I said, trying to return it. It's yours. She closed my fingers around it. Now it's part of yours, she said. So you remember why you fight, not for banners, not for speeches, for people like him, who live and die in darkness so others can pretend the light is free. I kept the medallion. I still wear it on a chain beneath my armor, where no one sees it but me. A reminder that glory is not what the Imperium says it is. Glory is measured in lives spared, not lives ended. But for every Kiros III, there are worlds where no clean solution exists, where corruption is too deep, the threat too vast, or time simply runs out. I think of Delanos II, where a warp storm tore a seam in reality and poured madness across an entire continent. We fought for 6 weeks to evacuate as many civilians as we could before the taint became irreversible. In the end, we saved a fraction, less than 3%. We burned what remained, not because they deserved it, but because what they would become would devour other worlds. Their voices followed us into the sky as the last gunships rose. I think of Captain Draus's death on the forge moon of Helios Secundus. He fell defending a Mechanicus cohort cut off by a Necron advance. The ones he died for barely acknowledged it. To them it was simply an optimal choice in a brutal equation. His body was recovered, his gene seed secured, and the Mechanicus records never bothered to mention the Space Marine captain who stood between their adepts and annihilation. I think of our own Phi, where rival Imperial cults slaughtered one another over doctrine, both convinced they were the Emperor's true voice. We weren't sent to judge theology. We were sent to stop the violence that threatened adamantium output. By then I wore the sergeant's mantle, promoted after Draus fell. It was my first command, and I wanted to honor him the only way that mattered, by minimizing the dead. I spent weeks trying to negotiate peace. I listened to sermons and grievances, searched for any shared scripture to build a bridge. It didn't matter. Hatred had become the point. Faith had become a weapon. When fighting reignited, we were ordered to support the faction favored by higher authorities, regardless of whether their claims were purer, truer, or simply louder. We killed thousands whose only crime was worshipping the same emperor with a different emphasis of word and ritual. I remember High Deacon Solis, leader of the side we were commanded to crush. When I led him to execution, he looked at me not with hatred, but with pity. "You know this is wrong," he said softly, too softly for anyone but an Astartes to hear. "You know we are loyal." "It doesn't matter what I know," I replied. "Only what I'm required to do." He nodded, almost sadly. "And that," he said, "is why the Imperium will someday collapse. Not from enemies without, but from rot within. When good men obey bad orders without question, evil wins." I executed him myself. Clean, as quick as I could make it. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself I was duty made flesh. I told myself many things in the nights that followed. None of them warmed the void. This is the honor the Imperium whispers about. This is the burden behind the titles. And still we endure. Still we fight. Still we try, against everything the galaxy teaches, to remember the human heart beneath the transhuman shell. This, more than any weapon, separates Vulcan's sons. We refuse to forget what we were. It costs us. In pain, in doubt, in long hours staring into darkness, turning decisions over and over, replaying faces we couldn't save. Other chapters carry their anchors. The Ultramarines have their Codex Certainty. The Space Wolves have their sagas and their fierce acceptance. The Imperial Fists have their iron stoicism. We carry embers. Every death, every failure, every compromise, glowing coals lodged in the chest. Like Nocturne's forges, those coals burn us and harden us at the same time. I have served as sergeant for nearly 4 decades. I have led brothers through campaigns that would unmake lesser warriors. I have made choices that still bite at the edge of my thoughts. I have watched good men die obeying my orders. I have ordered deaths on a scale no human mind was built to hold. And yet I have also seen moments of such pure humanity that they keep me from going cold. On Tartarus Prime, in ruins that had once been a scholar's district, I found a child, no more than 6, hiding beneath broken stone. She clutched a singed, stuffed animal, stained by ash and tragedy that wasn't hers. She should have recoiled from me, a towering monster in scorched plate. Instead, she reached up with unquestioning trust, as if she had known I would come. I carried her for 3 days through active war zones, her small weight cradled in arms built for crushing force. My brothers shifted their tactics without complaint, taking risks no cold equation would approve, because one life mattered even when the campaign's logic insisted it didn't. By any ruthless calculus, we should have left her. But we are salamanders. We do not live by that calculus. We delivered her to a refugee transport bound for a safer system. I never learned her name. She never spoke once. Yet when I handed her to the coordinator, she pressed the stuffed animal into my hands, an offering of gratitude more valuable than any citation. I still keep it. The toy, the Bronze Worker's Medallion. Small tokens, heavy meanings, proof that victory isn't always measured in territory or kill counts. Sometimes it's measured in a child who gets to grow older. There was Veritas IV, a feudal world ravaged by a virulent plague. We arrived not as conquerors, but as escorts for Medicae ships and supplies. For months, my squad moved from settlement to settlement, establishing field clinics, distributing treatment, burning the dead with reverence rather than contempt. The locals called us Black Angels. They built crude shrines. They sang hymns. It made my brothers uncomfortable. We do not seek worship. But it was the first campaign in decades where we didn't have to kill a single human being, where every act served only to protect and preserve. When we departed, the planetary governor presented each of us a pendant carved from native wood, a stylized flame, hope shaped into something you could hold. Most Astartes would dismiss such trinkets. We do not. We understand what it means when the people you protect try in their small way to say, you mattered. But for every Veritas Avul, there is a Kais Tertius, a world where salvation is impossible, where only purification remains. Kais Tertius was an industrial planet producing sentinel walkers and light armor for the god. It looked like 1,000 other smoke-choked manufactorum worlds, until shipments began arriving wrong. Crates sealed and stamped, logged and approved, arriving full of ash and warped metal. Machines that should have survived transit somehow burned themselves down to cinders, even in the void. Then Kais Tertius went quiet. We were dispatched to investigate, expecting rebellion, sabotage, Xenos infiltration. What we found defied neat labels. The factories still ran, the shifts still turned, the workers still labored. And each night, the newly built sentinels and tanks marched by themselves in orderly columns to immense pits carved into the crust. There, without hesitation, they descended into molten depths and vanished. When we questioned the workers, they answered in flat monotones about feeding the hunger below. Eyes vacant, movements too precise, no fear of us, no emotion at all. Deep scans showed anomalies in the planet's core. Something lived beneath Kais Tertius, something vast, Something old, something hungry. Brother Hector argued for study. This may be an unknown Xenos form. The Mechanicus should examine it. Others demanded the Inquisition. Some suspected a warp entity, a buried titan, a nightmare that should not be allowed to breathe. I listened while watching the Manufactorum through our armor-glass viewport. Workers moving like puppets. War machines walking to their doom as if obeying a liturgy. Finally I spoke. We burn it. The chamber fell quiet. Of all my brothers, I was the one most known for seeking alternatives, arguing for the difficult path that saved lives even when it cost us. That reputation was earned across centuries. So Hector asked, respectful despite disagreement. Why, Brother Sergeant? I pointed at the factories, the workers, the lines of machines. They are already dead, I said. If not in body, then in mind. Whatever is down there has taken them, and it grows stronger with every machine it consumes. All the more reason to understand it, Hector insisted. If it can dominate humans and machines, it's a threat we must counter. And how many will it take while you understand? I asked. How many ships will arrive to investigate and never leave? How many adepts will walk willingly into its mouth? How many worlds will be lost to curiosity? I shook my head. Some things aren't meant to be understood. Only ended. In the end, they deferred to my judgment, as duty required. We returned to our strike cruiser and began systematic bombardment. First the factories, then the pits, then any remaining centers of population. As the fire fell, our augurs detected movement beneath the crust. Something shifted, something woke. Continue, I ordered. Concentrate all remaining fire on these coordinates. The final salvo struck the strongest anomaly point. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planet began to split. Magma erupted in plumes visible from orbit. And a psychic howl tore through every mind aboard our vessel, so immense that even those without the gift heard it, felt it, as a pressure and grief and fury rolling across thought. Then, silence. We watched Kais Terteus for 3 weeks. The geological violence diminished. The psychic echo vanished. Whatever had lived inside was either dormant again or destroyed. The official report listed the action as exterminatus under the usual bureaucratic lies. Industrial collapse, unrest, irrecoverable loss. The truth was sealed in our chapter vaults and in the nightmares of those who heard that scream. This is the glory they praise, though most have no idea what they're praising. The honor of choosing between horrors. The duty of carrying weights that would crush a normal human soul. I have served the Emperor for 276 years. I have seen wonders and abominations beyond counting. I have saved millions and condemned millions. I have watched brothers fall and new warriors rise into their places. I have forged weapons in Nocturne's fires and reforged myself in war, again and again. Through it all, I have tried to remember what makes the Salamanders different. We remember. We feel. We carry every life taken and every life saved. We do not worship battle. We worship protection, no matter the cost to ourselves. There is an old Nocturne tale told to children at the forge. A child falls into the furnace. A great fire lizard, one of the true salamanders of the volcanic wilds, throws itself into the flames and coils around the child, taking the heat into its own scaled body. The child survives. The salamander survives too, but it is changed. Its once bright scales blacken, its eyes glow with the fire it swallowed. It can never return to what it was. But it saved the child, and in saving something fragile, it found a purpose bigger than survival. We are like that creature, marked by the fires we choose to enter, alienated from the humanity we were born to, but not free of it. Neither fully human nor truly inhuman, bearing the proof of sacrifice in charred skin and ember eyes, unable to go back, but we save the children. We protect the innocent. We stand between the dark and everything it wants to consume. And in that purpose, we find meaning in the transformation. Is that glory? I don't know. I know duty. I know brotherhood. I know the fire that forges us. In the great hall of our fortress monastery on Nocturne, there is a sculpture of Vulcan, our Primarch, shown not in conquest but in mercy, kneeling in ash to lift a fallen child. Massive arms curved around something small and human, a face made for war wearing an expression of compassion. Every aspirant stands before that sculpture before their true transformation begins. They are told of Vulcan's vow, humanity first, always. Then they are asked one question: are you willing to burn so that others may live? Only those who understand what that truly means are accepted. Only those who grasp that the Salamander's glory is not victory, but sacrifice. I stood there more than 2 centuries ago, a frightened boy from the ash wastes, saying yes without comprehension. Now I understand. I understand the honor and the burden of being a son of Vulcan. Fire takes us all in the end, but what we shield from the flames, that is our legacy. Not the legends printed in propaganda halls, not the medals pinned by lords who've never heard a city scream, but the lives that continue because we chose to stand in the way. I am Sergeant TK of the Salamanders. I have died 1,000 deaths, every brother lost, every civilian I failed, every world that burned too long. Small deaths, necessary deaths. But I have also lived 1,000 lives, every child pulled from rubble, every settlement spared, every moment of compassion in a universe that starves it. That is the paradox. We die so humanity can live. We enter the fire knowing it will scar us, change us, mark us as something other, and we would choose it again. Because we are Salamanders, Vulcan's sons, made in flame, tempered in battle, shaped by mercy. The galaxy burns, enemies are endless. The price grows heavier each year. Still we stand on the anvil of war, for the Emperor, for humanity, for the chance that somewhere a child reaches adulthood never knowing the horrors we have carried, because we carried them instead. That brother is glory.